Oleg returned home a little earlier than usual. Approaching the house, he noticed that the front door was open again. I didn't close the door again, he muttered to himself, slightly annoyed. Once inside, he slowly closed the door so as not to make any noise. Having thrown off his jacket, Oleg began to take off his shoes when voices came from the kitchen. He immediately recognized his wife, Emma's voice, but was surprised to hear someone talking to her. It was her friend Sarah. Something about Emma's tone caught his attention. He couldn't explain why, but he felt that this conversation was important. Having lingered in the corridor, Oleg tried not to reveal his presence and, without noticing it himself, began to eavesdrop. You would have seen him running, so everything would be perfect, Emma said with a slight sneer in her voice. And I just smile and pretend that everything is wonderful. But a little more, and everything will be mine. Are you seriously taking that risk? Sarah asked, sounding a little alarmed but interested at the same time. Risk? What kind of risk? Emma replied with a shrug. As soon as he pays off the loan on the house, I'll list it. All that's left is to get everything right, and I'll forget about him like a bad dream. And I can finally be with Jack. Oleg felt his heart sink from what he heard. His head spun. He stood as if buried, trying to understand what it all meant. His marriage, their home, everything he thought would be their future together, turned out to be part of a plan he had no idea existed. Oleg stood in the corridor, pressed against the wall so that he would not be noticed. He tried his best to control himself, but Emma's words kept ringing in his head like blow after blow. He heard her talk about her plan so easily, as if it were something completely ordinary. You know, I sometimes wonder how naive he is, continued Emma, not even realizing that Oleg was hearing every word. Works from morning to night so that I can live in comfort. He thinks that this is all for us, and I think about myself. I'm not going to waste my life on this boring toiler. Just don't overdo it, Sarah said carefully. You know, such plans can backfire on you. Don't worry, Emma smiled again. Everything is under control. He won't even know. A few more months and I'll be done. And then, well, we'll see. It was the moment when Oleg decided that he could no longer simply stand aside. He took a deep breath and, trying to gather all his strength, stepped into the kitchen. Well, you're having an interesting conversation, he said, standing in the kitchen doorway. His voice was calm, but inside he was seething with anger and pain. Emma and Sarah froze as if they had been caught at the scene of a crime. Emma's eyes opened wide, and she was visibly confused. Oleg, are you at home? Her voice trembled, although she tried to keep calm. Yes, at home, and very early, as it turns out, he replied, looking her straight in the eyes. Do you want to explain what's going on here? Emma didn't know what to say. Sarah looked like she'd rather disappear right now. Oleg stood motionless, waiting for an answer. Emma slowly set the cup down on the table, trying to collect her thoughts. She felt her throat dry. Sarah looked at her as if waiting for some plan of action. But Emma remained silent. The confidence that had been in her voice a few minutes ago was gone. Oleg, you misunderstood everything, she finally began, trying to smile, but the smile came out strained. Oh, I understood everything very correctly, Oleg replied, his voice still quiet but full of anger. He took a step forward, his gaze fixed on Emma. I heard everything, Emma. Your whole plan. How you put up with me just so I can pay off the loan, and then you turn me in. Did I miss something? Sarah sighed nervously and got up from her chair. Emma, I should probably go. Yes, you better go, Oleg said coldly, not taking his eyes off his wife. Sarah quickly grabbed her bag and walked out of the kitchen, muttering quietly, I'll just text you later. When they were alone, Emma tried to change tactics. Oleg, it's not what you think. I was just joking. It was a stupid conversation with a friend. Don't take it seriously. Are you joking? Oleg laughed bitterly. You said yourself that you were waiting for me to pay off the loan. What else am I supposed to think? Emma, I gave everything I could so that we could live in this house, and you just used me? Emma looked at him, trying to find at least some words, but Oleg didn't give her a chance. You know what? No more us. It's over, Emma. I'm going to see a lawyer tomorrow. In the meantime, you can pack your things, he said firmly, his voice holding no objection. Oleg, wait! Emma grabbed his arm, but he jerked away. No, Emma, I don't have anything else to look forward to, he threw over his shoulder as he left the kitchen. Emma was left standing in the kitchen, confused and shocked. She never expected that Oleg would return home at this very moment, and even more so that he would hear her conversation. Her perfectly laid plan began to crumble right before her eyes. Oleg left the kitchen, but stopped in the corridor, trying to understand how everything got so far. His thoughts were chaotic. He thought not only of himself, but also of her parents. He was paying for the apartment where they were now living, because their house burned down due to her brother's carelessness. He remembered how Emma had begged him to help then, promising that it was temporary, that her family would thank her. And now it seemed that all this was part of her game as well. Returning to the kitchen, he looked at her for the first time in recent minutes, not with anger, but with cold calculation. Emma, I just want to know one thing, he said, interrupting her attempts to say something. Not only did you use me for this house, but also to pay for your parents' apartment? Were they aware of your plan as well? Emma jerked her head up, her face alight with fear. No, they don't know anything, Oleg. It's not like that. You misunderstood everything. Ah, got it wrong? Oleg interrupted her. I paid rent for your parents because their son, your brother, destroyed their house. I did it because I thought we were a family. But now I see that you had no intention of being honest with by me. Emma began to cry, hoping to make him feel sorry for her. Oleg, it's not what you think. I'm really grateful for everything you're doing. It's just, I was under pressure and I spoke too much. Oleg came closer, looking directly into her eyes. Pressure? You lived in comfort while I worked 2 jobs so we could pay off both this house and your parents' apartment. I sacrificed everything for you, and you sat here making plans to get me out the door. My parents are in danger now too. I'm not going to pay for them anymore. It's not all my responsibility now. Emma gripped the table, her face turning pale. But it's not their fault. They'll end up on the street. You can tell them why it happened, answered Oleg coldly. Maybe it will teach you that greed and betrayal come at a price. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her in despair. Now everything that she was afraid of began to become a reality. Oleg stopped at the kitchen door before leaving. He turned to look at Emma, who was standing there holding onto the edge of the table as if it was her last defense against her entire world falling apart. Her eyes glistened with tears, but he no longer saw in them what he once loved. Tell me, Oleg began quietly, but there was a cold tone in his voice that Emma had never heard before. Who is the man you traded me for? Who is he that you were willing to destroy our marriage and everything we built together? Emma looked away, clutching her hands as if that might hide her guilt. Oleg, it's not right. It was just a mistake. Error. Oleg took a step closer. His voice now sounded louder. Don't make it up, Emma. I heard it all. You said you were waiting for me to pay off the loan to get rid of me. So don't play fair with me now. Who is he? Emma swallowed, realizing that there was no point in hiding anything, and finally answered, barely able to say the words. It's Jack. Jack? Oleg could not believe his ears. The same Jack who came here a few months ago to help with the repairs? The one I welcomed into our home and treated him to dinner? Emma nodded, her face burning with shame. It's not what you think. It just happened. Just happened? Oleg smiled bitterly, amazed at her cynicism. You let it just happen while I worked day and night to provide for you. Jack, Emma, he doesn't even work. He kept complaining about how hard it was for him to find a steady job. Emma started to say something, but Oleg interrupted her. You traded me for him? For an irresponsible man who couldn't even get his life together? And you think he'll be better than me when I'm gone? Emma was silent. Her tears flowed like a river, but Oleg no longer felt pity for her. He just shook his head bitterly. I realize now that it was all a game to you, but you know what, Emma? You made your choice, and now you're going to live with the consequences. What about me? I'm not going to be a part of this farce anymore. Oleg turned and left the kitchen, leaving Emma in silence, which now seemed to her to be bottomless. Oleg was standing in the bedroom, quickly gathering her things. Emma stood by the door, crying, but he ignored her. Every attempt she made to speak only increased his anger. When he finished, Oleg finally turned to her. Emma, this is the end, he said in a calm but firm voice. You betrayed me not only as a man, but as a person who did everything for you and your family. I will not take it one more minute. Emma sobbed, her eyes pleading for his forgiveness. Oleg, please, I was wrong. Give me a chance to fix everything. Oleg raised his hand, stopping her. You already had your chance and you lost it. Go back to your parents. Now it's their problem, not mine. Pack your things and go. Emma realized that it would be impossible to convince him. She began to pack her things in silence as she continued to cry. An hour later, she left the house with a suitcase, giving Oleg one last sad look. He stood in the doorway, watching her go. The next day, Emma moved in with her parents. Oleg did not kick them out of the apartment he paid for them. He knew that they were not to blame for what had happened, but he decided to stop all expenses for their maintenance. I'm not going to pay your rent anymore, he said, calling her parents. But I will not demand to return what I spent. I did it at the time with good intentions, and it remains in the past. Then solve your problems yourself. Emma's parents were stunned by what happened and even tried to persuade Oleg not to cut all ties. But he was adamant. I don't hold a grudge against you, Oleg said during the conversation. But I will no longer be a part of your life. What happened between me and your daughter is only between us. You will have to find another way to stay afloat. Oleg started a new life, rejecting the pain and betrayal caused by Emma. He left her and her problems in the past, determined that he would never allow anyone to take advantage of his kindness again. Emma was sitting in a small room in her parents' apartment. She twirled the phone in her hands, nervously looking at the screen. Her life was falling apart before her eyes. Oleg kicked her out of the house, stopped paying for an apartment for her parents, and now all financial worries fell on her shoulders. She was not used to working, and the thought that she would have to support herself seemed unbearable. Eventually, she dialed the number. Jack answered on the other end. Hello, she said softly, trying to sound gentle. I wanted to talk. I need your help. What happened? Asked Jack, but his tone was indifferent. He had already begun to understand that his relationship with Emma was not what he thought it was before. Oleg kicked me out of the house, she began, hoping to elicit sympathy from him. I'm living with my parents now, and the situation is very difficult. We might even lose our apartment. I don't know what to do. I need money, Jack. Just a little bit to start a new life. Jack was silent for a few seconds, then coldly replied, Emma, you know I'm barely making ends meet myself. I don't have the money to help you. Jack, please, she begged. We're together. You promised you'd always be there. I thought you had my back. I thought you were different, Jack said sharply. But now I see you're just looking for someone to provide for you. First it was Oleg, now you want it to be me? No, Emma, I don't need that. Emma felt her heart sink at the words. Jack, are you serious? After everything that happened between us? And what happened between us? He interrupted. You used Oleg to live in comfort, and now you want to use me. I'm not a fool, Emma. I don't need you anymore. Figure out your life yourself. The call ended, and Emma was left alone, staring at a blank screen. For the first time in her life, she felt truly helpless. Now she had neither Oleg nor Jack, and even her parents could not carry her problems for a long time. She realized that in this world, where everyone is fighting for themselves, she will have to change, otherwise she simply will not survive. Emma sat on the edge of the bed with her head down. The phone fell from her hands and she stared at the floor in silence. For the first time in her life, she realized that there was no one else who could solve her problems. She was used to a comfortable life at the expense of others. But now that was in the past. Her parents, who initially tried to support their daughter, became nervous because of their difficult financial situation. Her father, Peter, came into the room one evening and sat down next to her. Emma, we always wanted the best for you, he said with a sigh. But now we can't afford to keep you. We can barely pay the bills on this apartment. Daddy, I know, she answered quietly, but her voice lacked confidence. You know? That's good, because it's about time you got a job, he added sternly. You're not a child anymore. It's hard for all of us, but you have to start doing something for yourself. Oleg won't provide for you anymore, and I can't do what he did. Emma knew he was right, but fear and pride held her in place. She never worked. It was hard for her to even imagine what it was like to wake up every day and go to work. The next day, her mother brought her some newspapers with job ads. Look, you might find something, she said. Emma tossed the newspapers down on the table in exasperation. But a few hours later, when she was alone, she did open one of them. She looked through the ads, most of which were simple jobs: waitress, supermarket clerk, cleaner. Her pride protested, but she had no choice. A few days later, Emma applied for a job as a waitress in a small cafe near her parents' apartment. It was a job she wouldn't have even considered before, but now it was her only chance. The first day of work was a real test for her. She was not used to physical labor, constant running between tables, communicating with customers who sometimes behaved rudely. She came home tired, with pain in her back and legs. Her mother once tried to cheer her up. "Emma, it's hard, but you're learning. It'll help you get stronger." Weeks passed. Work became a routine for Emma, but with it came a new awareness. She realized how much effort life requires and how easily she used to live thanks to Oleg. Her thoughts returned to him more and more often. She decided to write to him. The letter was short but sincere. "Oleg, I know that you will never forgive me. And I'm not asking for it. But I want to say that now I understand how you felt all these years when you dragged not only our home, but also me. You was strong, and I was weak. I regret everything I did. Thank you for everything, even if you hate me." After sending the letter, she felt relieved. She no longer waited for an answer because she understood that her past could not be corrected. But now she had a new goal: to become independent. And although it was difficult, she knew that she would not repeat her mistakes again. Emma continued to work as a waitress, realizing day by day how difficult it was to make a living. Her parents could no longer sit idly by either. Her mother, Martha, found work as a cleaner in a local hotel, although it was not easy for her to adapt to the new conditions. Father, Peter, who worked at the factory all his life, took a part-time job in the warehouse, unloading trucks. The family gradually began to adapt to a new way of life. Now, no one expected someone else to solve their problems. Martha got up earlier than everyone else every morning, went to work, and in the evening, despite her fatigue, she cooked dinner. Petro worked in the evenings, but always found time to talk with his daughter about her plans for the future. One day at dinner, Peter looked at Emma and said, "Donna, I know you're going through a difficult time, but you're strong, and we're all learning to live anew. Maybe it's even for the better." Emma, who initially felt like a burden to her parents, now realizes that their work together helps them become a stronger family. One evening, her mother brought home a newspaper advertising an accounting course. "Emma, take a look. Maybe it suits you? I think it's a good opportunity." Emma nodded, feeling it was time to take the next step. She signed up for courses and started studying after work. At first, it was difficult for her to combine everything, but the support of her parents and her own determination helped her to move forward. A year has passed. Emma successfully completed the course and found a job as an assistant accountant in a small company. Now she was no longer dependent on her parents, and her mother and father were also kept afloat by their hard work. The family lived modestly, but each of them realized the value of their efforts. One day, returning home after work, Emma saw Oleg on the street. He was walking in the opposite direction, but stopped when he saw her. "Oleg," she said, coming closer. Her voice was confident but calm. "Emma," he replied, looking at her intently. They stood in silence for a few seconds. Emma finally broke her silence. "I don't expect anything from this conversation, but I want to thank you. Thanks to you, I realize that life is not about waiting for someone to do everything for you. I have changed, and not only me, we have all become different. We have all," Oleg nodded. "That's good, Emma. I'm glad you took control of your life. I hope you find your happiness." Emma smiled, and they exchanged a brief but sincere look. Each then went their separate ways, knowing that their shared past had left important lessons for both of them. Emma returned home feeling strangely relieved after meeting Oleg. It was important to her that he noticed her change, although she did not expect his forgiveness or return. She realized that now she has a new life in which she herself is responsible for her decisions. The next morning, she went to work as usual, but this time with more enthusiasm. Her new position in accounting required more attention and knowledge, but she liked the feeling that she was growing. Colleagues also noticed her diligence, and soon Emma began to receive positive feedback from management. Marta and Peter also began to feel relief. Marta, although tired after work, found joy in the fact that their family was no longer dependent on someone else. Petro, working part-time, was now saving part of the money, planning to finally buy a small house that would become a real home for all of them. Emma knew she couldn't take back her past, but she wanted to make one more attempt to thank Oleg for the lessons she had learned through their breakup. A few weeks later, after receiving the first prize, Emma decided to do something important. She bought a small box of expensive cigars, which Oleg once loved, and wrote a letter. Oleg, I know you don't want to hear from me anymore, and I respect that, but I want to thank you again. Not for the money or the time you spent on me, but for what you made me to understand the value of life and work. Now I know what it's like to achieve something on your own, and that pride is worth everything. I hope you are happy and on your way. Thank you, Emma! Asterisk. She left a box with a letter at the reception of Oleg's office, not wanting to see him in person. Oleg received a gift after work. He read the letter, examined the box of cigars, and thought for a long time. His face remained impenetrable, but in his heart he felt that this chapter of his life was finally closed. He opened the box, lit one of the cigars, and looking up at the night sky, thought about how difficult the two of them had been. And though their paths had now diverged, he no longer felt pain or anger, only peace and confidence that new opportunities await him ahead. Oleg, working in the company where he spent most of his time, met Melissa, a woman who made a strong impression on him from the very first day. She was kind, sincere, and determination always shone in her eyes. Melissa joined the company a few years ago, starting from a humble position. But thanks to her perseverance and hard work, she quickly climbed the career ladder. Management often recognized her merits, calling her a role model for other employees. She was never afraid to take on difficult tasks and always helped her colleagues when needed. Oleg and Melissa began to communicate during lunch breaks, discussing work issues and later more personal topics. Melissa turned out to be not only a smart, but also a very sensitive person. She came from a simple but intelligent family where everyone worked honestly and with respect for others. One evening, after work, Oleg invited Melissa to drink coffee. It was their first informal meeting, and they both noticed how much they had in common. Melissa talked about how difficult it was for her at the beginning of her career, but she never gave up because she always believed that hard work and honesty would lead her to success. This conversation deeply affected Oleg. He saw in her a woman who was completely different from Emma. Melissa did not wait for someone to solve her problems. She made her own way. After a few months of their relationship, Oleg realized that he was ready to take a serious step. He invited Melissa to a restaurant where they celebrated her new promotion together. During dinner, he took her hand and said, "Melissa, you have become for me the person I've always been looking for. Your values, your attitude to life, and the way you treat me. All this made me understand that I want to spend my life with you. Do you agree live with me?" Melissa smiled, her eyes shining. "Oleg, I too feel that our lives together make sense. Yes, I agree." Oleg and Melissa began to live together, and their life became harmonious and happy. Melissa supported him in all his endeavors, and he supported her. Their home was filled with mutual respect, support, and trust. Oleg felt that he had finally found a woman who truly understood him and shared his values. Together, they created a life that was not based on calculation, but on love, work, and joint efforts. It was not easy for Oleg to restore his trust in women after what he experienced with Emma. His experience left a deep mark, and even after he began a relationship with Melissa, doubt and caution lingered with him for a long time. But Melissa turned out to be a woman who, with her actions, patience, and sincerity, was able to dispel all his fears. She never pressured him or demanded his trust. She was just there, showing with her work, attention, and support that she is a person you can rely on. Over time, Oleg began to feel that with her, he could relax and be himself. Melissa always understood his feelings. She said, "I know it's hard for you, but I'm in no hurry. You'll see for yourself that you can trust me." Oleg saw how Melissa honestly treats everything, to work, to their relationship, to her friends, and even to the smallest details of life. This strengthened his confidence in her. Over time, his fear of betrayal disappeared, and he realized that he had found a woman who was truly trustworthy. After 2 years of relationship, Oleg proposed to Melissa. It was a quiet evening at home, without too much pomp. He simply said, "Melissa, I know you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me back my faith in people and showed me that love can be true. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Marry me!" Melissa smiled and, a little embarrassed, answered, "Yes, Oleg, I want it too." The wedding was small and cozy in the circle of the closest people. At the ceremony, Oleg said, Melissa, you are not only my wife, you are my support, my joy, and my faith in a better future. After the wedding, they started living together in a house that they built together. Their happiness was made even greater when a few months later, Melissa announced that they were expecting a refill. Hearing this news, Oleg felt boundless joy for the first time in a long time. He hugged her and said, "Now I know that life not only gives trials, but also gives true miracles. You are my miracle, Melissa, and our baby will be next." Together, they waited for the birth of a child, planning how they would raise it in love, trust, and mutual support. Oleg was no longer afraid of the future because he knew that he had a woman by his side who would never betray him. Melissa and Oleg prepared for the birth of a child with great enthusiasm. Together, they decorated the children's room, chose furniture and clothes, dreamed of how they would go out as a whole family, and how they would raise their child in an atmosphere of love and mutual respect. One warm spring morning, Melissa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Oleg was next to him in the hospital, and when he saw his son for the first time, his heart was filled with happiness that he had never felt before. "Our son is our new head," Oleg said, holding the baby in his arms. "This is the beginning of the best chapter in my life." Melissa, tired but happy, smiled. "We will create the best world for him." Together, Oleg felt like a real husband and father. Now he not only had a wife he could trust with all his heart, but also the family he had always dreamed of. He knew that this happiness was made possible by his strength, determination, and the right choices. Years passed and their life remained harmonious. Their son grew up in love, imbibing the best traits from his parents: diligence and kindness from Melissa, honesty and courage from Oleg. Oleg and Melissa were convinced again and again that true happiness is built on mutual respect, trust, and love. They went through a difficult path, but now they had everything they wanted: a home, a family, and confidence in the future. And although life sometimes brought new challenges, they knew that together they would overcome everything. Because their love became not only a test, but also the strongest foundation for a happy life together.